Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and I've got something interesting to share with you. I haven't posted in a while. I've been very, very busy, but I'm coming up on summer vacation, which means I'll have a lot more time to invest in some videos and some thoughts on various techniques and ideas for close-up magic for the Common Magician. This came to my attention because I recently saw a review on a book, a Hector Chadwick book, which deals with falsifying a coin flip. And what it is it's a compilation of a bunch of different ideas, as I understand it from the review. I have not read the book. And these are very old, long-standing ideas. It's just, again, a compilation of a variety of ideas that have been available for some time now. And I'm assuming that most of what's in there is stuff that is quite in the open. You can go back to, old episodes of Scam School, Scam Nation with Brian Brushwood, where they talk about coin flipping. And then here's some thoughts of my own, which I know run parallel with some other people. Because, when it comes to falsifying a coin flip or predicting a coin flip, there's only so many things you can do, and they're fairly obvious. The ways in which it can be falsified or forced are quite simple. If we were to break this down, there's two sides. One is that you either force the coin to land a certain way. That's one. You can force it to land a certain way. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or the other side of it is you can know how it has landed. Then there may be something in the middle there where you can know how it has landed before it is revealed. Okay? You know how it has landed, and then you can control the revelation because you know how it has landed. So those are kind of the two major posts, and then this sort of in-between manipulation idea. That's it. That's all there is to this. There's not a lot more thinking that goes into it. The question is how can you make it land a certain way, or then how can you know how it has landed? Use your imagination to figure that out. We'll look at a few ideas here. Again, these are things that I have used before. I don't use falsified coin flips or predictions very much, and I think my feeling on this is that as a demonstration, I think it's weak. No matter what you do. Let me put it this way. I saw a coin flip routine on Fool Us. This is a few years ago. I cannot remember who it was. It was a really good trick. But I remember watching it as it was going on, and after the very first time, my thinking was, everything's in the open. I know what's going on. And it fooled them. It did. It fooled them as to what was, what the mechanism, the effect was. And I don't know how and why it could have fooled them. And I understand that it wouldn't necessarily fool. It wouldn't necessarily be understood by the real audience in the real moment, because there was a bigger presentation to it. But the fact that it involved coin flip after coin flip after coin flip after coin flip to decide some things, and then it comes down to a predicted outcome, it just was abundantly clear to me that the only method has to do with that flipping of the coin. And somehow either controlling the outcome or knowing the outcome or manipulating what is known about the outcome. One of these two main things or something in between. So I think it's all out there in the open. I don't think there's a lot of how should I say this? I don't think there's a lot of unique work done on this. I think there might be some people that claim it, but the solutions to this are really abundantly clear, I think, if you do any amount of thinking about the idea. Okay? So I just want to get that out of the way before I share some of my own thoughts on this, and then someone says, hey, this is published somewhere. Yeah, I would imagine that these ideas are published hundreds of times over in very well-known publications and very obscure ones that you can find somewhere else. So that's kind of the reason why I'm bothering to look into this. So as an effect unto its own, I think it is weak for those reasons, because everything is in the open. It's kind of like equivocate. It's all there. I mean, you can see everything that's going on. I think it's more powerful, and I've used it as either a one-off or as an influential element of a greater effect, meaning that a coin flip decides something about some routine that has multiple choices to it, or a variety of exercises that are going on. So I think that's the better use for this kind of a thing. So let's look at it. I've got a quarter, just a quarter, and normally when someone flips a coin, right, you know what that looks like. They flip a coin and then it is caught and then it is there. We'll talk about this in a minute, but there's other ways where a coin is flipped, caught, and then placed flat down on a surface, usually on the back of a hand. I don't know why it's always the back of a hand. I've always assumed that it's on the back of a hand to demonstrate fairness, that it's caught, unknown, and flattened out on the back of a hand so that it cannot be manipulated from that state. If it's on the back of the hand, my appendages can't, my fingers can't grab it and flip it over. So this must make it fair in some way. In sports, whenever they have to do a coin flip, some kind of a commemorative coin that they flip, large coin, they'll flip it and it will fall directly on the ground. That's probably the fairest way to do a coin flip. None of what we're going to do here can really be done in that way, although I think you can, under the right circumstances, with one of these ideas. You might be able to flip the coin and have someone else catch it. And when they catch it, they should be able to open, and it should be predictable. Okay, I believe that you can do that. It's not something I do, but in my experimentation with this over some time, I'm pretty confident that would work pretty regularly, if not all the time. Okay, so let's look at it. So that's a coin flip. What a coin flip is. A coin is taken. It is typically flipped with the thumb, usually flicked into the air, right? You can kind of hear a ring if you look at it. You listen carefully, you'll hear it ringing. Obviously, with a bigger coin, you can hear the ring. I don't know if that's picked up on the camera or not, okay? But you can get that kind of ringy sound. So how do you falsify that? Well, it's a simple matter that the coin, there's one unrealistic way to do this and one realistic way to do it. The unrealistic way is to flip it a known number of times to know what the outcome is. I find that solution is absurd. Okay, I don't see any way to do that with regularity, to actually flip the coin, but flip it in a known number of times to know what it comes out at. I think the better solution is to not flip the coin, to have it tossed in a way in which it does not move. Okay, so that is to take the coin, and we'll say that we're going to call heads, right? So heads, that's what it is. If you take a look, you can see that it is heads. Same thing, right? If I do it again, tails, right? So this is tails, and I guess I should have called that a head. This will be tails. Sorry, try that again. Ready? This will be, and you can't do that, obviously. This is tails. Okay, so if you can see it on the camera or not, but just so you don't have to take my word for it. So what's going on there? I think the idea is that it needs to look like this coming from this position, right? So normally when you flick a coin like this. It's sitting on the finger, the thumb comes underneath, and then you flick up on it to get it to tumble end over end. You want to start from a position that looks like that. Now, no one can really see the exact setup, but the way I think about this is more like throwing a frisbee. It's like a tiny little frisbee. And the idea here is really a science-based kind of control. This is what makes it dependable. I think this is quite dependable because it's essentially like using one of these, right? This is a gyroscope, a toy gyroscope. And I don't have the string on it here to spin it. But you know how you spin a gyroscope and it's got a weight on a bearing, and the weight is spinning, and the inertia of that weight, I can feel this right now, the inertia of that weight spinning around makes it so that it does not want to change its attitude, right? With the inertia going around in the weight at the outer extremities, it's not really, there's a term in physics, a centrifugal force, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's not a force at all. All it is it's inertia. It is merely inertia. Something is in motion and it wants to sustain that motion. But it wants to sustain that exact motion, meaning that it's going in this direction. Once you change the attitude on that motion, which is in a 360 field all the way around, it does not want to move. It wants to push back towards the motion that it is in. To push it out of that motion requires considerable extra force in order to change its direction. So when you take a frisbee and you throw the frisbee, it's a gyroscope. It is creating a certain amount of force that keeps it level in that attitude. It does not want to wobble because it is spinning. It wants to maintain the inertial energy that has been put into it until it is stopped by an external force. So if you think about it in that way, the coin will maintain the same attitude if it is tossed like a frisbee. Now, rather than tossing out like a frisbee, if you've ever taken a frisbee and tossed it more upward away from you, and then it'll glide back at you, it's more like that. And if you get a spin on it without giving an outward thrust to it, you're really just trying to get the coin to spin in place, relatively in place, going up and then coming down and landing flat on a surface. Now, if you can get a little bit of a wobble, so it looks like instability, but actually it's still quite stable because of the inertial, not force, but energy that's in it, the energy that is in the mass and being demonstrated by spinning. If you get a little bit of a push on it, it will create what looks like a flipping end for end, but all it is it's a wobble. If you've ever thrown a frisbee and given it kind of an awkward throw, it will still maintain the inertial energy that you put into it in the spin, but it may wobble a little bit, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, I've heard people talk about techniques for flicking on it and snapping fingers and all that kind of thing. The way I look at this is really just like throwing a frisbee. Hold it as if you were holding a frisbee on the finger. So I'm holding it it's sitting, resting on my middle finger with my thumb on top and then my first finger on the front, as if I was going to toss it out like a frisbee. The kind of the overhand, not the backhanded throw, but the overhanded throw. Okay, and all I do is I toss it up in the air, kind of like that. But what I'm doing is I'm not tossing it out and I'm not tossing it straight up. I'm sort of lifting my hand as I apply spin, and it will spin like that and maintain. Now, it doesn't have to spin hard. It just has to have a little bit of rotation to maintain that attitude so that it won't want to change. Again, like the gyroscope. It's just doing the same thing. Now, there's no external forces on it once it is let go, so the only force that can be applied to it is the force that I applied to it at the moment of release. There's no external forces being applied out here, so it will maintain that exact same attitude, even if there's a wobble on it, all the way until it lands flat on the surface. And because it has that inertial energy, it will land flat. It will be a very stable kind of descent. And at the moment that it hits, it won't want to turn. It will just stop dead in its tracks and sit still. Now, if there's too much of a wobble and it catches an edge, that could change things, okay? So I've heard this described as kind of a flicking motion. Again, I don't subscribe to that, but the idea is that putting a flicking or a snapping motion on it can give it the wobble. I think it's more important to just throw it like a frisbee, but give it a little bit of an angular toss. So I'm not tossing it exactly flat. It's canted a little bit as I toss it up, straight up in the air. And I find that, maybe 8 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, it does give it a pretty good wobble. And if it doesn't, it doesn't matter, especially if this is a one-off. If you're going to do this over and over and over and over again, let's say the presentation is to display 10 times where it comes out the same, I think this is a no-go. This presentation doesn't work because people will start looking at its attitude in the air. even if you were to put a good wobble on it, people will start looking at that situation. What is the coin doing in space? And as it hits the top of its parabolic journey, as it gets to the top of it, it will slow down, suspend, and then fall. And in that suspension, you do see that the attitude is not changing, even with a wobble. So I find that this kind of approach is good for a one-off, maybe doing a couple of these, but not necessarily drawing attention to the fact that you can call it now or that it is predicted. More so using it as a control to get an outcome that is required for another effect. Okay, so again, throwing it like a frisbee up in the air. It's at heads right now. I throw it up, I catch it, it lands here. Now, you can theoretically do this and then have someone else put their hand out and have them catch it. You say, put your hand out flat and just catch this in the palm of your hand, and you toss it relatively their direction, and then it lands that way. So I haven't gotten any wrong except for the one that I dropped just by kind of tossing it in this direction. Okay, so you throw it like throwing a frisbee up in the air. Sometimes you can get a wobble on that. Now, the larger the coin, the harder it is to hide this. Okay, I think that smaller coins are better, particularly like the size of a quarter. This is a $50, and if I do the same thing, I can get a little more wobble on it, but the attitude staying the same all the way up and down is a little bit more apparent with this. And then, of course, if I go to a silver dollar, it becomes really abundantly clear that it's not flipping. So, again, I think this is good really only for smaller coins like a quarter. Now, there's another thing that you can do, and that is to know what the outcome is from a fair flip, the fair flip. And if you know what the outcome is from a fair flip, then you can either call it ahead before it is revealed, or you can control its revelation to make it come out the way it actually flipped, or to change it to make it come out another way. So in this case, what we're going to do is give it a real flip and give it a real catch. But what we're going to do is we're just going to feel it. We're just going to feel it. Now, you can feel it in a couple of different ways. There's two ways I think that you can feel the coin. One is if you catch it at the fingertips like this, you can feel it with your thumb quite easily. If I toss it up and I catch it in my hand, I can feel it just as I gain control in my fingers with my thumb. As I swipe it over, I know which way it's going. On some coins, it's harder to do this with. I'm going to talk about I think what is the best coin to do this with in a moment. But you can feel it, and then from this motion, from this position, I can either show what it is as I know it. In this case, it is tails, and I can show it as tails by extending out, or I can take it from this position and I can drop it, turn it over on the hand, and then show the opposite side. That's kind of the generic way to control it. Now, it's inconsistent because in one case, if I show it like this, and then in another turn, I do this, that's an inconsistency. It's better if you create consistency, and that brings me to this one. If you toss it, another place that you can feel it is from the palm on the middle finger pad. If I catch it like this, right in the middle of my palm, my middle finger can swipe over the top. I can either go forward on it or backward on it, and I can feel which side of the coin is facing up if there's a very stark difference in relief from either side of the coin. From here, I can do a couple of things. I can either show it open, or I can take it and turn it over. Or what I can do is I can turn it over every time. Now, this is where it gets tricky. In this case, if I know what it is, in this case I know it's heads up, and I want to show tails, it's very simple. I turn it over and then I drop it on the opposite side of the hand. If, however, it comes down, it's heads, and I want to show heads, all I need to do is turn my hand over prematurely, and the coin will drop now towards the fingers into finger palm. So now it's inverted, it's facing the other direction on the palm. And then what I can do is I can drop it on the hand, either flipping it over, or I can leave it in the hand and turn it over. Okay, so in this case, I have it heads, and I'm going to show tails. I turn it over and I show tails. In this case, it's heads. I turn over, it goes to the fingers. I drop the fingers down, and the coin is going to stay in the fingers as I sweep up. Now I have to put my thumb on it because I can't use the centrifugal force to hold it in place, as I talked about earlier. But it's actually going to go with the fingers and then come down on top of the hand. Okay, so that looks like this. Here, it's in this position, and I can show tails because it was heads by keeping it in the same orientation, just turning it over from the palm. Or it's in this position, I can turn it over and then slap it down, and now it's showing heads, showing the other side. So those are the two different ways to do it. Now, I favor the middle finger rub. I think this is more consistent, and I also favor always turning it over on the hand. This is not a good coin to do it with. This is a classic quarter with an eagle. This is an eagle tail quarter, eagle back quarter. And I can't remember what year they started the state coins, but actually the state coins make this a little bit easier. I've got a couple of states here. One of these is a 2017 Indiana. This one has some militiamen on the back of it, and it's got a lot of relief on it. So there's a very sharp edges on the tail side of this compared to the head side. So this one's really easy to feel. And there's actually probably quite a few more. These are just ones I had. Another one I had was, this is U.S. Virgin Islands. Has, I'm not sure what the plant is, if it's a cypress tree or what it is. But there's some kind of a figure on the back. And it's got a lot of leaves on it, and there's a lot of sharp relief. So this one works really good too. Honestly, the best coin to use for this is a classic Kennedy half dollar. A Kennedy half dollar. The Kennedy side, Kennedy's face is very smooth. There are no sharp edges on this side. And then the side with the eagle, and you got to find the older years of these. There's a few newer years where the relief is not quite as bumpy and stark. But on the older ones, this is a 1980 Kennedy half dollar, and the eagle on the back has really deep relief. You can feel this instantly, right away. It is like night and day, the difference between the heads and the tails. So when I take a Kennedy half dollar and I flip it, and I catch it, just immediately I can feel that this is heads up. So I have a couple options. I can either turn it over to show tails, or if it's heads up, I can drop it to the fingers and flip it over and show the heads. And it's a fluid motion, right? So I don't know how it's going to land, but let's say we want tails, right? I flip it, and I know that I have tails, so I have to flip it over to show tails. So every time it's going to be this way. Now, if you do this right and you have someone else call it, it gives you time. If someone else is calling what the outcome is going to be, that actually creates time for you. If you are going to be the one calling it, that doesn't create time for you because people see you with the coin, thinking, coming up with something, and then showing it. But if you flip the coin and hold it and say, what is it? And they call it out, I'm way ahead because I'm waiting on their response to my question, which is giving me time to analyze the situation. They say tails, and then I show that it is indeed tails. So this is another way to get a specific, consistent result, a known result ahead of time, but with a fair flip. I highly favor this rendition of it. You can do this with even larger coins because it is a real flip. Again, you want the more stark relief, the better. This is a steel stamp of a Morgan silver dollar, and this isn't that great. Even though there's an eagle on the back with a lot more relief on it, the relief is so shallow, it's really hard to feel the difference between the eagle and then Lady Liberty for the head side of it. Kennedy half dollar, classic Kennedy half dollar. Before, I can't remember which building is on the back of the Kennedy half dollar. And I'm kind of ashamed I can't recall. There are some later designs that have structure on the back. I don't think it's Independence Hall. I can't remember what it is. You want the eagle. You want the eagle. The eagle has the most relief. That's the best way to do it. So again, just to recap this, all of this is useful. Or rather, one side of this is useful because of physics, and that's what makes it consistent. The inertial force, the inertial spin, energy that is in the coin allows it to be consistent. You don't have to really be afraid of it. All you need to do is toss it with a significant enough amount of spin that it does not want to change attitude. There's no other forces on it besides the force that you apply into it, in which case it will maintain, again, you have to catch it. It will maintain the exact same attitude as when you throw it. You can predict it. So heads, I toss it, I catch it, it's still heads. You can even toss it so someone else catches it. Giving it some height is a good idea too. If you give it good height, this is another thing. As I said before, when the coin takes its parabolic journey and it reaches the top, it will suspend. If you give it height so it's suspending over the spectator's view, it's harder to see. So that's another thing to consider. If you're tossing it very shallow right here and you're afraid, there's a tendency when doing this technique to be afraid and to toss it shallow so that nothing can happen to it. But you have to think about this scientifically. If I'm the only force that is in the coin and I'm giving it a rotation, I can toss this quite high. There's nothing that's going to be applied to it in terms of external force beyond the moment it leaves my hand. So because of that, I can toss it quite high and know that it will return in the same orientation, if that makes sense. So give it some height if you're going to do this, because it does mask the fact that it is not tumbling whenever you do that. In this technique, the bigger the coin, the harder it is to hide the secret, because it's a little more obvious that the coin is not changing attitude when the coin gets bigger. So nothing, I think, bigger than a quarter when you're using that technique. My favorite technique is to catch it from a fair flip, identify what it is by feel. I do it using the middle finger swipe from a palm up catch, and then I can either turn over to show the opposite side, or I can flip it onto the fingers and turn it over to show the side that landed up. And it looks identical either way I do it. You really can't, there's not enough nuance change between the two presentations to really see that they are different, especially if you only do it a couple times, and especially if it is not in effect for its own sake. It's actually being used in presentation of something else. So we've talked about dice on this channel before, and legitimate dice and things that can be predicted from that in terms of probability. So it makes sense to talk about coins. I mean, if you have a coin and you have a couple dice and you have some predictability to it, more certainty with the coin than with the dice, but you have predictability nonetheless, you can actually fabricate a pretty solid, slight multiple out maybe routine that gives a really impossible prediction from what appears to be chance operations. So, and that's another thing, mixing this up with other activities also helps to disguise it. Because, I mean, what's more fair than a coin flip? It's something we've known since we were very young. I'll flip you for it, right? Trading someone's lunch at the lunch table, you got a coin, I'll flip you for it. This has always been thought of as fair, but it can be falsified in several different ways. So anyway, hopefully you learned something from that. I wish you the best of luck with this, and happy magicking.